This time, on the Adventures of Tarka, we find a mangrove paradise all to ourselves. We get a little wet sailing between the islands, and we settle into routine in the spectacular Hollandis Cays. With Nushta sick with dengue fever here in the undeveloped San Blas Islands, we felt pretty fortunate that it wasn't any more serious than it was, and after a bit of rest, she eventually started to feel more like herself. So we set out to explore more of our surroundings. Our destination is the Lemon Cays, and we found a spot in our charts deep within a system of reefs and mangrove islands that we hope we can successfully navigate. To aid in our navigation, we have tried experimenting with a GoPro on top of the mast. The idea was to use the Wi-Fi feature from the GoPro to get a bird's eye view off the bow in real time. I don't think it's a bad idea, but it certainly does need some work. In any case, we were able to navigate the reef system by carefully following waypoints on reliable charts. There are many moments on our voyage where we are thankful we are sailing in the age of GPS, and this is certainly one of those. After a bit of navigating, we found a nice spot for Tarka nestled between some mangrove islands. Beyond these islands are reefs and shallows in just about every direction. So there should be plenty to explore. However, there are crocodiles in San Blas. And to us, this area seems like it might be prime crocodile territory. So we'll need to carefully scrutinize every floating log we see. For the moment, we will rest from our day of sailing and leave the adventuring for tomorrow. What you reading? What's it about?
China.
China?
Yeah.
What about China?
China and their politics.
Oh. The next day, we set out in the dinghy to check out one of the reefs that we saw with the drone footage. We put the dinghy on a nearby beach and swam out towards the breakers from there. The coral here appears to be in better shape than a lot of the other places we've been in the Caribbean. Maybe that's because these reefs are visited less frequently, or are perhaps less impacted by the effects of climate change. But it sure is a sobering thought to think that once, not too long ago, all the Caribbean reefs probably looked this healthy, if not more. We also saw our first shark in quite a while, this little nurse shark resting at the bottom. We suspect though that he'll just be the first of many here in San Blas.
No, this is the size of your
Excuse me?
your banana.
My banana's that size.
Yeah.
Well, that's very nice of you.
Yeah.
It's not
I
quite
just
that
want
big.
everybody to know small boats, small bananas.
What's a big banana? What are you talking about? You're just a giant. We think we're falling in love with the San Blas Islands and might have a hard time leaving, which could be a problem because we're running out of food. It has been more than 3 weeks since we've been able to purchase fresh food, and we've thus started to hit up our supply of cans. What's for dinner tonight? But picking something is really a game of what's most tolerable. Brown beans with sauce? You wrote it.
Yeah, sauce.
Sauce?
Sauce. Again, because
Just brown beans
maybe I
with
did a
sauce.
little bit, but if I haven't tasted.
Carrots and peas. Heart of palm. What is that? Other than the occasional lobster or fish, nice meals are something we've had to give up for this lifestyle. And I'm gonna have...
Why are you filming the most shitty meal you're ever gonna have on this boat?
What is what we eat every day? People need to know what the reality is like sometimes.
No.
Sometimes we have lobster. Sometimes we have brown beans and sauce. She doesn't think I'm funny.
No. You're not.
But lucky for us, the very next day, this boat showed up. It was like a gift from the cruising gods. These guys basically stock up from supplies from Panama City, and then make the trip out into San Blas, selling all sorts of provisions. Fresh goods like fruit and veggies were much welcomed, but they also had goodies like soda, beer, and even Nutella. I may have had a moment of weakness. There is a drawback to our resupply though, and that is packaging. Proper waste disposal does not exist in San Blas. Some opportunistic locals will go as far as charging people to take care of their trash, only to dispose of it in the mangroves or just straight into the water. I guess for them it's out of sight, out of mind. Many sailors instead choose to burn their trash, keeping it out of the water. However, not all of it can be burnt, and we certainly didn't want to be burning our plastics. Instead, we compromised by burning our paper trash and storing everything else for proper disposal later on. On the bright side, having to manage and store our own trash aboard a small boat for months on end has been an excellent lesson in being less wasteful. Maybe the world would be a better place if we all tried this little experiment. Other than snorkeling, there is also work to be done. New episodes certainly don't produce themselves, and the only time we can work on them is when our solar panels are doing their job, which tends to be in the hot part of the day. And with that, we got to work. And though we've been happy to have this anchorage all to ourselves, we were very excited to see our friends on Mila pull into the anchorage and drop their hook next door. Tarka and Mila have been bumping into each other ever since St. Martin. And Teresa and Lucas's arrival was a reason to celebrate. So, once settled, we hopped into our dinghies in search of a nice beach for an evening barbecue. Hey, what are you doing?
I have a weapon.
It doesn't look like a very dangerous weapon. The only problem is the fire's on top of them.
Yeah. Didn't think about that.
It took a bit of doing to get the coals going without resorting to using gas from the dinghies, but we got there. The food was all very good, and certainly better than our canned dinner the other night. But I think mostly we were just happy to catch up with old friends.
Yeah, that's fine.
Even when I was a single-hander, I was never really alone out here, and that's in part because of wonderful people like Teresa and Lucas, and others that I've met along the way. After a few pleasant days together, another barbecue, some more snorkeling, it was time for us to find a new set of islands to call home, and Mila was heading back towards the mainland to meet family. So with the anchor up, we gave a quick wave and headed on our way. This will be the last time our boats will share an anchorage together on this voyage. Mila is headed north to Mexico, Florida, Bermuda, and eventually all the way back home to Germany. And meanwhile, we have plans to enter the Pacific. Still, I'm sure this won't be the last time we see these two. Though Sandblast offers pretty benign sailing, it can still be quite blustery with the trades crashing in. So we only hoisted a reef main for this trip. A gap in the islands gave us a few hours of exposure to the full brunt of the Caribbean swell, which provided an exciting and rather bumpy ride to our destination. We're heading over to the Hollandis Cays, a chain of islands and little bays protected by a long barrier of reef. As fun and exciting as this all was, we did notice a small amount of water coming in to where we'd been storing our books. And after pulling the contents off the shelf, discovered the culprit was our chain plates. We had pulled all of these back in Colombia to fabricate and install new and improved backing plates. But in the process, the butyl tape we used to reseal them was either insufficient or wasn't correctly placed. Luckily, it wasn't too much work to extract each and to do the job right. We're keeping our fingers crossed that they will never leak again. We anchored in less than 10 feet of water in a spot lovingly called the hot tub. The water here is crystal clear, and the islands and the outer reef offer plenty of protection. We also just so happened to anchor next to friends on a boat named Gilana that we met the very first day we arrived in Sandblast. And by sunset, like sailors do, Mike had come over from Gilana to share some local knowledge, but also just catch up in the backdrop of a perfect sunset.
So we bought her that, and it was like her granny's inheritance.
Life is just about perfect here. The water is as clear as a swimming pool, and unsurprisingly, it didn't take long for us to find our way in. Anyway, Tarka needed a minor hull scraping, and in a place like this is definitely one of the more pleasant jobs on a boat. There are also a few odd jobs that need to be done around the boat, like always. We had a series of screw holes for our cockpit engine cover to plug and re-tap, so I whipped up a batch of epoxy and got to work. epoxy is never that much fun to work with, and the good people over at West System probably never intended their tins to be stored on a boat, as inevitably they become piles of rust and will start to leak. So I also took this opportunity to transfer the resin and hardener into plastic bottles for safer, more stable storage. Life on Tarka is a simple one with few luxuries, and out here we are more or less disconnected from the world, which normally we wouldn't complain too much about. But with videos that need to be uploaded and an audience patiently waiting, not having a connection can be a real problem, and out here it takes pretty extreme measures for us to pick up even a weak signal. Eventually, we found a way to bypass tethering restrictions, and we were able to connect by hoisting a phone to the top of the mast. But next time you're wondering why there's no new episode of The Adventures of Tarka, just remember that we're doing our very best out here.